Hello, everyone. Hey. So this is not the first meetup that's happened here. How many of you have been to a previous one of these? Good sense. Okay, wow, a bunch of you. Wow, that's great. It's cool to see this growing community in Amsterdam. This is, I think, my favorite city in the world. Yay! I have a bicycle parked out front. It's mine. It stays in the garage when I'm not here, but I feel like a local now that I own a bicycle in Amsterdam. That's great. It's cool to see this spreading. It's interesting. Holacracy is spreading and growing faster in Europe than it is in the US right now. And it's growing fast in the US. Right? It's really striking, just the explosion of interest over here. And Amsterdam seems to be a kind of an epicenter of that growth. It's really amazing to see. Don't know why that is, but something you guys are doing here is working. It's pretty cool. How many of you are totally new to Holacracy and don't know much about it? Anyone? All right, good. Well, you'll get at least a little bit of a glimpse today. And there's a lot of resources online. Anyone actually in a company doing this, living it day to day, regularly? Oh, wow, a bunch of you. That's really cool. Anyone about to start or kind of near that point of diving in? Cool. Well, you guys have one hell of a journey in front of you, as these guys can tell you. So it's interesting. I don't really have any specific topics or thoughts in mind. So I wanted to ask you guys, what are you curious about? I have a bit of a perspective on what's going on with this whole movement in the world, not just Holacracy, but self-organization and the groundswell change in the way we run companies that we're in the middle of right now. So what are you curious about? What can I tell you? What do you want to know?
How big is the movement?
Man, I have no idea, but it's growing by leaps and bounds. To give just a sense, when we first started this Holacracy part of this, we would do a 5-day training. It was our kind of first big training we did. We do one of those every year, and we'd be lucky to get like 15 people showing up. I'm here on my third back-to-back one of those trainings in Europe now. We scheduled this third one because our second one in Amsterdam sold out, 40 people, 5 months before the training, and then we opened another one right afterwards, and that one just about sold out. That happened to us last time we were here, and we're doing many of these now, constantly. I'm doing at least a couple a month, and they're filling up, and we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people going through this. There are, as best I can tell, probably approaching 1,000 organizations in the world now that are doing Holacracy specifically, which is pretty mind-boggling when you think of the growth. That's all within the past couple of years. So if you plot it, it's an exponential growth curve, right? Like I keep catching myself thinking like, wow, maybe next year there'll be 1,500 companies because there were 500 a year ago, and I realize that's actually really faulty reasoning. This thing's exploding, and that's pretty cool. And I think the self-management movement more broadly is exploding as well. But there's something about Holacracy that's enabling it. And I keep hearing this from entrepreneurs that love the ideas of self-management, but how do you implement it? And I can tell you from experience, it takes 10 years to home grow your own approach to self-management. It's a very slow process. It's like home growing your own microcomputer in the early PC revolution. It's hard, right? And not everyone wants to do that. But as soon as you can buy an Apple, right, or a Mac or whatever, you can suddenly not have to reinvent everything. You can build on top of it and then figure out what to do with this and how to put it to use and extend it. And that's happening with Holacracy now in a big way. So I think it's really helping to fuel that broader growth. That's pretty amazing to see it. Another good example, look at the number of Google hits for something like Holacracy. It was 0 about 10 years ago, not even. And now it's all over any major media, newspaper, television, you name it. It's a household word. My Airbnb host found out, oh, you're doing Holacracy. Wow, I rented an apartment from the guy. Right? It's just a colleague of ours. His mother called him and said, hey, have you heard about this Holacracy thing? I think you'd really like it. elderly woman called him and he said, yeah, I'm actually already doing it, Mom, in my organization. Right? And I mean, there's just anecdotes like that. It's really hit a critical mass, and it's growing faster than I can track at this point. And what else? Yeah.
What is the difference between, if you say self-managing different structures? You have Holacracy, but you have, for example, also coaching culture. What's the difference between Holacracy and other self-management
Yeah.
structures?
So I think you could put Holacracy in a category of self-management systems. The distinction I'd make, if there are a lot of homegrown approaches to how to run a company without a management hierarchy. And they've actually been around for decades, right? Look at Morningstar. They're a $1 billion revenue tomato processing company that has a whole lot of employees, and they have no managers and no management hierarchy. They have an alternate system. And it's customized for Morningstar. It's homegrown for them. It fits their culture. It fits what they need, right? And it's really hard to replicate. They've tried, and after decades of them doing this now, it just doesn't spread. It's their approach. And there's others. Gore, Gore-Tex, the makers of that, they've got an approach to self-management. There's at least a good handful of companies doing that, more and more. There's Buurtzorg, is that how I pronounce it? Here in the Netherlands, right? Something like that. Yeah, that's what he said. Right? Yeah, they've got a really cool approach to self-management. They're doing this as well. All of those systems are unique and different. Holacracy is more like a packaged off-the-shelf system that you don't have to invent yourself. You can take it, build from it, and build on top of it. Right? Again, the metaphor, it's like in the early days of the microcomputer revolution, everyone using a microcomputer had homegrown their own unique system. And actually, the microcomputer revolution didn't start until we had generic standard systems, because then people can learn from each other, they can build on top of them, they can write standard software that runs on top of the standard systems. Right? And I think that's what Holacracy is. It's a specific system. It's, say another way, it's a set of rules. Right? The management hierarchy is a set of rules of the game for how to structure and run a company. Holacracy is an alternate set of rules. And there are many homegrown sets of rules that are an alternate for management hierarchy. In contrast, many other systems and techniques like Agile, anyone here familiar with Agile software development? Love it, that's my background. It's not a replacement for the management hierarchy, it's something you build on top of it. Right? To use my metaphor, it's like an app that runs on top of the management hierarchy operating system. But it's actually more compatible with the Holacracy operating system. Most of the change approaches, leadership development, a lot of the organizational learning, Agile, whatever, lots of cool change interventions, assume the management hierarchy is the only way to structure a business, and then try to make up for its downsides with some cool new process on top of it. And that's where I think the self-management movement is saying, wait a minute, what if we question the fundamental power structure itself? Right? The underlying power structure. And that's what Holacracy is. It's a different level of intervention. It's changing the way power works. After you adopt it, you have nothing that looks like a CEO anymore. You have nothing that looks like a management hierarchy as we know it anymore. You have a different power structure. You have a constitutional one that's spelled out in a constitution that defines how power works in the organization, and mostly how to change that, how to define what roles you need, and what do they expect from each other, and who makes which decisions. It's giving you the meta process to define all of that. Right? So that's kind of the distinction I make. What is it? How does it fit into that broader self-management thing? I had another thought about that, but I totally forget what it was. So, yeah.
I'm curious how you see Medium stopping using Holacracy.
Yeah, there's several like them now that have started and stopped. And I think we'll probably see a bunch more. Most of them never really did a full self-management implementation. They did cool governance meetings around a management hierarchy. Right? And I think that's what Medium did as well. To say it another way, there are leaders, plenty of them, entrepreneurs out there, that are brilliant designers or visionaries, and they want to build a company where they are at the center. Right? They are the CEO, the center visionary of that, and they want everything to be organized around expressing their vision, design, and they want to be at the center of all of that. Right? And they do awesome work in the world. And I'm a big fan of so many of those kinds of entrepreneurial visionaries. Steve Jobs, you name it. Ev Williams has done that many times in really good organizations. Holacracy is not for them. Holacracy is for the CEO, entrepreneur, leader that is very clear they don't want to be at the center of this, right? They might still have a purpose they want to serve, that's fine, but it's for those that are wanting that leap to say, I want to build an organization that I'm not the center of, that's not all hanging around me. And for those people, I think a system like Holacracy works really well. When I look at Medium, they still had a management hierarchy, right? Lead link, one of the roles in Holacracy, was looked at as a full-time job. It's not. For any of you that know Holacracy, it's a 5 to 10% time job, maybe, right? If it's a full-time job, you're doing something wrong. And that said, it got them where they went. They still got value out of it. So you can use it even not as intended and still find good value, which is great. But I think we'll see more like that too. There's plenty of organizations that aren't really, really wanting the leap to a self-managing system. Yeah.
Do you see any sectors or markets that are catching on faster or better or quicker? Or?
I'm always shocked how broad it is, right? I could name some, like it does seem software is a hot button, but there's so many, the Washington state government, old bureaucracy, has 200 people now in this Holacracy experiment that they're doing, right? There's a company down in Louisiana. Those of you who know the U.S., this is kind of the opposite of Silicon Valley, right? Right, middle of nowhere, Louisiana. Insurance company, right, doing this now with very conventional kind of organization. And there's so many examples, and they're so broad. I'm surprised, and I think Holacracy is as broad as the management hierarchy, right? What kind of companies do management hierarchy? Well, it's an option to run any kind of company, anywhere where you want to organize people, right, towards some common purpose. Holacracy is just an alternative.
Yeah, we're now struggling with HR systems and salaries and rewarding people. How do you deal with that?
Holacracy is absolutely no answer for that, intentionally.
I know.
And neither does the management hierarchy, which is interesting. People often ask, like when they hear about no managers and this alternate structure, they often say, well, what about compensation and hiring and firing and budgeting and all of these important things? The thing is, the management hierarchy also doesn't answer that. There's no built-in way to compensate people in a management hierarchy. There's a framework you can build a compensation system on top of, right? You can link to the management hierarchy and define your own compensation system. And every company doing management hierarchy has some different rules around how compensation works. Holacracy is the same, it's just a framework. It's not telling you how to use the framework. So you're gonna have to find how compensation works. But now you're building it on top of a different framework. Or to say it another way, any of you ever had some tension about one of your main systems, like compensation in a company you worked in? Right? How do you change the system if you have some tension with it? It's almost impossible to affect change to core systems in a management hierarchy. And that's where Holacracy comes in. You're going to start by doing compensation, firing, hiring, budgeting, exactly like you do today in the management hierarchy when you switch. But then you can change them. As soon as anyone sees, hey, here's a way that's actually limited. Here's something getting in our way. There's a process to change it. So the goal of Holacracy is not to give you the answer for all those things. It's to give you the process for finding the answer more effectively than you otherwise can. All right, cool. Do we have time for?
Let's do two more, and then we'll.
Great. Okay. I see a hand that's been up. Oh, okay. And then this guy's been itching to get in. Yeah, go ahead.
So what will a resume look like in the future?
What will a resume look like in the future? God, that's a great question. Here's what I hope it looks like. Not a piece of paper at all, but a bunch of links to previous roles that you filled in a nice software tool like Glassfrog. That's our software for helping companies manage Holacracy. Right, where you can actually point to, here's the actual work I'm doing, right? Not the job description, but the actual thing I'm really doing day to day. And that would be a much more interesting job description. Yeah.
Do you think that kind of S&P 500 kind of big companies, enterprise, could leverage some of the attributes of Holacracy without implementing the full process?
Can you play half of soccer and still have fun with half the rules? I don't know. It's hard. You're not playing soccer. You might find some ways to have fun. Sure, kicking a ball around can be fun, but it's not playing soccer, right? And it's not going to give you the full experience of the sport. And I do think that's very true with Holacracy. It's a sport. It's the rules of Holacracy are all intertwined and interconnected. You can do all of Holacracy in part of a big company. That works really well, and there's many big companies doing just that. But it's really hard to do part of Holacracy even in part of the company or all of the company. right? Better to do all of Holacracy and part of the company. And that's because of that. It's this intertwined set of rules. That said, there's a chapter in my book all about what you can do with it if you don't want to adopt the whole damn thing. But my publisher made me write that chapter. Right? It's, of course there's something you can take out of it.
Yeah.
But I think where it shines is as a replacement for the management hierarchy. It's a new way of structuring power. Right? And that is my own personal purpose in the world, as best I can tell you it is, I show people a radical new way to organize power. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's what I love doing, showing people a radical new way to organize power. And to get there, to do that, it has to be a complete system. It's a full shift. And man, it's different. You know, it's as shocking as the management hierarchy actually once was from what came before. That was a shocking new way of organizing. I think Holacracy fits that as well.
One more then? All right.
So say I would freeze you today, and we'd wake you up in 10 years. How will it look, the Holacracy movement? And what was the biggest challenge looking back at that point?
Yeah. Oh God, I have no idea.
I would imagine. Come on, I got you.
Yeah, sure. So right now, part of this challenge is just that the interest is exploding, the movement's exploding, and one of the things we're trying to do in my organization is give people as many tools to support this as we possibly can, because we can't be in every one of these companies doing it. So we now have a whole network of certified coaches and consultants that we're training to go out and do this work. We have software that helps accelerate it for the do-it-yourself market. We have lots of free tools. We have the book. We have all this other stuff. So definitely one of the challenges is just how do we scale the support for this thing? Like it's just exploding. That's a hell of a challenge. So there's that. I think what's really interesting is more and more it's becoming a question, right? 10 years ago, who was questioning management hierarchy, right? I mean, sure, people didn't like it, they pushed back, but the alternative, which is not an alternative, is throw it out. Right? People mistakenly think Holacracy is just throwing out the management hierarchy, and that's dead wrong. It's a replacement structure. It is more structured than a management hierarchy, not less. It's just a different structure, different kind of structure, right? So 10 years ago, who was talking about alternative structures to organizing companies? And now, you know, it's all over. Hell, it was on some random comedy show on HBO, right? Like a little while ago. There's, you know, it's all over. It's this thing, you know? There's an actual international discourse now on how do we need to structure and organize and manage companies, not on top of the management hierarchy, but the fundamental power structure is being questioned. So how do I envision that changing? What I'd really love to see is not just that being now a more normal standard, it's already becoming one. I'd like to see it spread to other areas of life, right? Like what if by living in companies where people get to own their autonomy, right? Show up as adults instead of as children in a management hierarchy with parental managers, right? If you could show up at work every day with the whole system reinforcing you're an adult, lead your life, lead your roles, here's your autonomy, go. Right? What does that change in society? Right? Like, it's hard not to think about our current election cycle in the United States right now.
They have a constitution.
Yeah. Well, whatever side of the current aisle or whatever you'd like, all we're seeing is authoritarian leaders who are saying, give me more power in government and I will solve your problems for you. Now they have very different ways of wanting to solve the problems, but what all the candidates right now that are mainstream candidates agree on is that government should have more power to save the people and take care of them and protect them and all this stuff. Right? And what I'd like to see is instead of searching for better leaders, if we find people that are used to being an adult in their organizations every day, their whole life is reinforcing, you're autonomous, you're an adult, you don't need somebody else coming in and taking care of you as a parent, you can take care of yourself. And what does that do to society as that becomes the norm? Maybe we don't care who wins the election because we start shifting to systems that allow distributed peer-to-peer self-organization in society more, right? That allow us to say, you know, wait, maybe we don't need better leaders. In the same way that right now, in companies doing Holacracy, there's a realization, we don't just need better managers. We need a better system that doesn't rely on better managers. And I want to see that same shift happening in society, where instead of just getting a better politician elected into this office with massive top-down power, We say, how do we shift our societal systems so that we don't need better leaders in those kinds of positions? We have systems that obsolete the need for it. And so that's what I want to see in society.